We're recording now, so just say hi and who you are.
Do I look at the camera or do I look at you?
You can look at me. You don't have to look at the camera. They know who you are.
My name is Peter Christopherson. I'm presently in Coil, but I was in Throbbing Gristle and Psychic TV for a while. And his name is Thighpaulsandra.
I'm currently in Coil and Spiritualized.
And he's a recording artist for my label.
Yeah.
For our label. Whatever.
When you started, what was your first instinct to start working on music?
Well, I had met Genesis and Cozy when I was living in London when I first moved to London, and in the first instance we were just kind of friends. I went to see one of their kind of performance art pieces that they were doing just by chance, and so we sort of hooked up and started hanging out together, and I was suggesting artistic things to them, and I started doing performances as part of their art collective, which at the time was called Coom Transmissions. And after we'd been doing that for a few years, we toured a bit and we did some shows in different colleges and art spaces, and in Amsterdam and stuff like that. And I was getting increasingly frustrated with the fact that the audiences that we were performing to were largely kind of art establishment, art, kind of upper class, but middle class people that were not very highly challenged and not very highly motivated to think about the things we wanted people to think about. So I basically suggested to Genesis and Cozy that it would be better to have access to a different kind of audience, and that one of the ways to do that would be by having a band, albeit not a band in a conventional form. So that idea having been planted, they kind of thought it was a good idea, and that's when we decided to start doing Throbbing Gristle. I mean, I had done music pieces in school with kind of unprepared pianos and tape recorders and stuff like that, but I didn't at that time really think of it as being something that could be taken to an audience. I was just doing it for fun, really. So and the other reason for doing Throbbing Gristle, of course, was that it afforded the opportunity to meet young men who might be persuaded to do things they might otherwise not have done. Which has always been a major part of my life.
When did Chris Carter get involved, and when he got involved, was that pretty much the start of the musical?
Yeah, once the idea of doing a band had come to the surface. I think Chris was a friend or knew Cozy in some connection. I'm actually not quite clear what that was myself, but because he was already sort of tinkering with synthesizers and had a lot more sort of hands-on musical knowledge than the three of us did, he was co-opted and brought in to provide a more technical aspect, and also because he knew his way around the soldering iron and the kind of circuit boards that you could get from Practical Electronics, or PIAI or any of those kind of firms. He was the perfect person to build the stuff that we were suggesting. I think mainly that I was suggesting, but because I was aware of the possibilities of technology at that time, but I didn't have the patience to actually solder resistors and all that stuff together.
But after time, you were making some of your own instruments too.
Yeah, we all kind of did stuff to make the sound what it was, and what was the kind of sound that was interesting to us, because we didn't really have any interest in being Amon Dual or being a band that already existed. We wanted to do something that was completely outside that, but just by doing it in a kind of musical context, it undermined people's expectations of what they were supposed to hear, and so it was possible to kind of address people's emotions and people's I don't know, subconscious, if you like, or just to address different parts of people that, because they thought they were watching a band, that you wouldn't be able to do in an art gallery.
At what point did the music sort of, was there a point when the music just went from playing around to actually thinking like more about composition and development?
I haven't reached that point yet, so I don't, I'm still playing around.
What sort of did you think that you achieved the reactions that you wanted to with the music, or do you think that you were still playing to a rather highbrow audience?
Oh no, Throbbing Gristle didn't do that many shows. I think there was like 30 in total, and the reaction was always different. It was, sometimes, you had a front 3 rows of kind of 10-year-old kids that were kind of entranced and fascinated and, shocked and awed, but also in appreciating it. And other times, we had audiences of, like the Slits came to one of our shows and, were really violent and tried to wreck the equipment and, were really aggressive. And so it always, provoked a response of one kind or another. At the very beginning, we always had, like bouncers as security, but sometimes the money that we spent on having a couple of heavies just in case we got beaten up was more than the fee for the whole show. but in point of fact, 99 times out of 100, we didn't have any, serious aggressive. Not like it became with punk, a few years after that, where people did get hurt and stuff. But I think generally because we were doing something that was so different and so, the opposite of what people were expecting. Very occasionally people reacted violently, but mostly they were just gobsmacked. It forced people to re-examine what it was that they felt music was about, or what bands were about, or what shows were about, and ultimately, hopefully, what they thought the world was about by association.
What has the developments of different technologies since the start of TG? Things changed rapidly in those years from like 1974 to 1980, 1981. What sort of technologies were you using? What sort of what did things help a lot? Did things hinder things a lot? I remember there's an interview of Genesis floating around somewhere, and he said at some point in like 1979, we've done all we can do with technology for music, and I think he's been proven wrong, year after year since that. So what is your take on the development of musical technology from there?
Well, in some ways, it's afforded a lot more possibilities. That obviously computers now allow you to correct your mistakes to some extent, and then they allow me to be a lot more flexible in the way that you could put sound together. But that's kind of obvious, really. I don't know. Technology in the past 5 years seems to me to have, actually, in some ways, got to affording new possibilities that weren't afforded before in terms of, playing sound live and manipulating it live. but still within a structure of sounds that already exist, like samples or whatever. I don't know, in a way, I don't think that the medium is the message. To me, it doesn't really matter if you're using, the latest version of Ableton Live 2 point whatever, on a titanium PowerBook, or if you're using a rack of 8-track cartridges. It's fundamentally still the same thing. What's important is the sort of disrespect that you have for it, and make sure that first of all, that you don't come out with cliches, and also that you don't use the equipment necessarily in the way that it was designed to be used. So it's like the preset. It's like the worst invention ever. It's exactly the same way as people buy the latest synthesizer and just use numbers 1 through 50. Software or any kind of piece of hardware intrinsically, suggests a way that it should be used for convenience, and you have to try and avoid that if possible. So, like if you put, 4 8-track cartridge tape players in a box, that's not obviously the way they're intended to be used. And then if you hotwire the record. Actually, I didn't use 8-track cartridges. I was using cassettes, but I hotwired the heads on an automatic reverse car cassettes. They're actually 4 tracks. So you can wire them to use them like a 4-track machine. And I had a little switch box that Chris built that selected any of the 4 tracks simultaneously, or separately, or sequenced them, stepped through them, or could be played with a keyboard. So it was sort of like similar to a mellotron, but whatever was on the cassette was not, was pretty, you could have whatever you liked. And it's not really that different from having, Live or Cakewalk Acid or whatever, providing a bunch of sequence, things that you can cut in or sequence. It's fundamentally the same thing, but you just have to make sure that what you're doing is, original and interesting. And in order to do that, you can't take the instructions as being the way that you ought to do it. That's one thing. And the other thing is, you have to, you just have to make sure that the sound does it for you. You have to make sure that whatever it is that you're inflicting on an audience, actually, means something to you first, and then hopefully that intensity of feeling will come across to the audience. So it's kind of a long-winded answer to your question, but
That's a long question.
but it's not, to me, the technology isn't really very important in a sort of way. I mean, it is tremendously important insofar as it's fun to, if you find an elegant piece of software that does something cool, just from a kind of geek point of view, that's kind of fun, but it doesn't really matter from the point of view of the music or the shows or the records or whatever.
It's just a means to an end, really, isn't it?
You haven't played live for 15 years until 2000. Has portable computer technology afforded you the ability to do more of the things that you want to do live?
Yeah, it has. Well, it has when I get it together. I never wanted to stand behind a rack of equipment and just press play on a CD, because it seemed like it was boring and it seemed like it's a lie. And to be honest, I still do it now sometimes. Some of the tracks that we played yesterday, I wasn't doing very much to at all. Although they were being played off the disc, multi-track disc live, I wasn't manipulating them very much. But that's because I was worried about other things at the time. But I have, in theory now, the facility is available technology, in technology to completely reshape the show as minute by minute, as you know. So that makes it possible to do the kind of sounds that we do and produce them in a spontaneous way, and for the performance to have its own shape and unique quality and so on. So that, in answer to your question, yes, it is possible now to do that. But I just wasn't very interested in, or energetic enough to do a kind of 9 Inch Nails thing where, 3/4 of the show is on tape and the rest of the show it just involves breaking a lot of GX7s and hurting yourself. And that actually didn't interest me very much. It makes for a good show that lots of Americans can get very excited about, but it didn't interest me. Lovely guys though.
Did you design the visuals for last night too, and like the strobes and everything like that, or?
Pretty much, yeah. I mean, obviously I wasn't running that on the day, but that's we try and get local crews to follow a kind of basic structure of how that works. The people in Montreal, the people look, seem like they're all really good and together, and good crews and everything.
Thighpauls, tell me about you. Tell me your introductions to music, and I know it goes back a long time. Tell me about your.
Well, I had a very musical family. Both my grandfathers and my mother were all musicians, so I was kind of force-fed music from a very early age, and lived in a house where pop music wasn't allowed, and we just used to listen to classical music 24 hours a day. So
you didn't have a television until you were 15.
No, I didn't have a television until I was 15. So we used to listen to the classics all the time. And growing up in that atmosphere, I suppose it was inevitable that I was going to be a musician eventually. So
or a psychopath.
Yeah. So that's where it's all come from. But I think because I was force-fed a lot of the modern the classical music, the standard repertoire, Mozart and Beethoven and Bach. I really, by the time I was a teenager, I was looking at other things, and we used to go to a lot of chamber music concerts with where a lot of works received first performances. So I got to see a lot of modern music inadvertently, I suppose, Ligeti and Stockhausen and all this sort of stuff. A lot of those things I got introduced to at an early age, so I kind of got hooked, and it's been a slippery slope ever since.
How did you, tell me some of the groups that you were working with, and how did you meet up with Coil and get involved with this?
I met Coil. Well, I was working at the time with Julian Cope, and I'd made a few records with him, and I eventually became the keyboard player in his touring group. And John came to see a show at the Shepherd's Bush Empire. Did you come as well? No. Just John came, and he wanted to meet me, so he got in touch with my manager and set up a meeting, and we kind of hit it off from the first day, I think, and after we became friends, I was eventually asked to join Coil, which was great.
Actually, you're responsible for Coil playing live, basically.
I am responsible for Coil playing live, because I said, you've got to be able to, it's so easy, you've got to do it. And many tears have been shed since that day. But, here we are, we're still doing it, so. Took a lot of arm twisting though to make them do it.
What do you see Coil becoming? What do you see Coil now as versus how Coil was maybe 10 or 20 years ago? How do you see it? How do you see it now, and then where do you see it going from here?
Well, it was Coil always was a vehicle. I mean, initially it was, John Balance's band, and he just asked me to help him do some stuff. And the main difference right now is that I'm not sure how much he wants to do it, or how much he wants to make music. He tells me that he does, but he's going through kind of some weird things in his life, and I don't know if he'll continue to do that. And I don't really know if it's a reason, if the reason he's doing it is just to make money, or if he does feel kind of musically motivated. But assuming that he does, I'm sure we will continue to work together. But because we've sort of split up personally, obviously the sort of dynamic of it is slightly different. But the basic motivation for me has always just been whimsical. If there's always kind of new stuff coming along that's interesting, and I do like making music, so I'm sure that we'll continue to do that. And whether it's Coil or whether it's called something else, I don't know. But I think one of the things that's not good for a relationship, in just as much as it's not good for a band, is for people to take things for granted, to take the future for granted, or take any kind of continuity really for granted. In order to have a stable and fulfilling relationship, not stable but an interesting relationship, that lasts, is you've got to you've got to keep things the way they were when you first met. When you actually can't put anything else out of your mind except getting into somebody's pants. And it's sort of like the same with the band. You've got to approach your music as though you want to get into its pants. And if you just assume that next year there'll be another tour and another album, then it's fucked up. You can't really do it. So right now I'm not assuming anything about next year, apart from some shows I've got in May. If you have the attitude like just met some young German and you really want to do something with them, or if you've just met some piece of German software and you really want to do something with it, it's fundamentally the same. So on that basis, we'll continue to do things, but I don't know what they're going to be.
Absolutely.
What would you like to see Thighpaulsandra stuff doing live, or doing musically, or what kind of ambitions do you have?
Well, I'd like to do some live Thighpaulsandra shows, because we haven't done any yet, and I think it'd be a good thing to do, because I think it would be quite different to the records. So
quite different to everything in existence.
Yeah. So that would be, I think it'd be quite a challenge to do that. So and again, I like kind of doing different things all the time, and resetting all the parameters and seeing what's going to happen. I'm not afraid of change in that way, and I think it would be. I've got some ideas for shows that could be, quite exciting, I think. So, yeah, hopefully we can set that up in the next few months and do something. But also be good to keep Coil going in some form or another, and keep working with this chap, because it's always interesting, and it's always it's always a challenge, isn't it?
Yeah, I have a bit of a horror of like Rick Wakeman, used to be the keyboard player of, what was he in? Yes, and a number of other bands, and now he makes a living in England by going on like daytime TV quiz shows and those shows where you have to guess the value of the house, which there's one show in particular he does with Toya Wilcox, and he also does like these 200-date tours of really little English towns, you know, where he does a kind of multiple keyboard extravaganza thing, and then between songs he tells funny stories about the rock and roll lifestyle and things like that. And I can tell you now, that's never going to happen to me.
Or me.
And you know, the only way that I would want to resurrect any kind of old project or maintain any sort of current project beyond what I felt was its sell-by date would be, you know, if it was possible to do something new with it. You know, if I ever were to play with a band that I was in previously, the purpose would not be to just be nostalgic and to play old songs. The purpose would be to do something different and actually, you know, make some comment on how people had changed or how things had stayed the same in a bad way, you know, politically or socially or musically or whatever. I'm getting a wind-up signal. So if that was to happen, then you could be sure it would be something new and different and worth seeing.
All right, tape is about to end. It's on the 0-minute mark left.
Okay.